Sketches of Japanese Manners and Customs ***** E-text prepared by DOS Shisha University, Michael Cecilski, Sandra Brown, and the Project Gutenberg online distributed proofreading team. Sketches of Japanese Manners and Customs. Sketches of Japanese Manners and Customs by J.M.W. Silver, Lieutenant Royal Marines, Light Infantry. Late of the Royal Marine Battalion for service in Japan, illustrated by native drawings, reproduced in facsimile by means of chromolithography. London, 1867 to Colonel Sir Edmund Saunderson Prideo, Bart. Dear Sir Edmund, these few sketches of Japanese manners and customs were collected during the years 1864–5, at which time I was attached to the Battalion of Royal Marines for service in Japan, and it is now very pleasing to have the privilege of dedicating them to one who was the friend and companion in arms of my late father. In memory of this bond of friendship, and in grateful acknowledgment of the many kindnesses you have shown me, this dedication of my humble efforts to assist in the elucidation of the social condition of a distant and comparatively unknown race, affords me deep gratification. With much respect and esteem, I am, dear Sir Edmund, very faithfully yours, J.M.W. Silver. Royal Marine Barracks, Fulton, the 29th of January, 1867. Contents: Festivals and holidays, fires and fire brigades, domestic life, the tycoon, daimyos, and aristocracy, the court of the Mikado, the Harakiru, national games and amusements, crimes and punishments, superstitions and religious observances on the Tokaido and in the tea houses, the spy system, the bath house, love of flowers, list of plates. Title: Festival in honor of the birth of children. Merchants' Great Festival. Otinta Lama. A fire brigade on its way to a fire. A Japanese wedding. A daimyo paying a state visit. A daimyo and family witnessing fireworks. A minister of the Mikado on a religious expedition. Theatrical performance in front of the Mikado's palace. Ladies of the Mikado's court performing the butterfly dance. The tycoon's messengers reading the sentence. The sacrifice. A daimyo's funeral. Cremation of the body. Relatives collecting ashes. Public wrestling in the great amphitheater at Vido. Interior of a theater. Mode of conducting a criminal to execution. Lonins, or outlaws, robbing a rich merchant's house. Exposure for infidelity. Selling indulgences by public auction. Praying a soul out of purgatory. Sudanji, or last offices. A baker's shop. A tea house merrymaking. Uya, or bath house. A flower show. Book cover. Festival in honor of the birth of children. Festival in honor of the birth of children. Merchants' Great Festival. Merchants' Great Festival, Japanese Manners and Customs. Chapter I, Festivals and Holidays. The first feature of Japanese life that prominently presents itself to the notice of the stranger, is the number of festivals and holidays held in honor of the various deities, warriors, and sages, or in accordance with some ancient custom of the county, which is as paramount an authority as the most stringent of its laws. Of these festivals, the Okidontako or Great Holiday, which takes place about Christmas, and lasts a fortnight, is the most important. Previous to its celebration, it is customary with the people to settle accounts, and amicably adjust any quarrels or estrangements that may happen to exist, and they evince the same spirit that actuates Christian nations at this season, by a general interchange of presents and complimentary visits with their friends and acquaintance. So anxious are the merchants to take this opportunity of settling with their creditors, that, when the dealers have deficiencies to make up, articles are frequently pressed on foreign residents at the treaty ports at prices previously refused. The Gagate-siku, the emblems of which form the first subject of illustration, is also a festival of great importance. It takes place about the middle of June, which is the 5th month of the Japanese calendar, from which it derives its designation, and is kept up with more than ordinary spirit during the 3 days of its continuance. It is held in commemoration of Gongen Soma, the great general to whom the present dynasty owes its existence, and the Japanese date their births from this festival, even if born the day after its last celebration. It has several curious symbols, the most striking being huge aerial fishes, in imitation of the koi or carp, large crimson streamers, representations of Gongen Soma crushing a demon, and the heads and tails of crayfish, with which they decorate their dishes and the entrances of their houses. The floating fish flag is hoisted over every house in which a boy has been born during the preceding 12 months, and is emblematical of his future career. As the koi or carp, which is very plentiful in Japan, finds its way up streams and rivers, surmounting all obstacles in its way, and rendering itself by its fecundity and edible qualities useful to the whole country, so the child is to make his way through life, boldly fulfilling his destiny, and proving himself a useful and beneficial member of the community. In the same way, the scarlet streamer indicates the birth of a female child, and the domestic nature of her duties. The crayfish are used to remind the people of their humble origin, it being traditionary that the empire originated from a race of poor fishermen, and the consequent necessity of humility, temperance, and frugality, in their different stations in life. Various qualities are ascribed to the hero of this festival. He is considered the especial champion of women, for whose protection he instituted several laws and regulations, among others, making it obligatory on them to blacken their teeth on entering into the married state. He is believed to be able to charm away fevers, to alleviate suffering, and to prevent the lives of his protégés from being embittered by jealousy. During the celebration of this festival, the whole country presents an extraordinary appearance. Aerial fishes, streamers, and bamboo decorations meet the eye in every direction, and the people in gala costume, which is always worn on holidays, greatly enhance the brilliancy of the scene. The gala dress is much gayer than that ordinarily worn, but there is little difference in the material, the dress of every class being regulated by stringent sumptuary laws. Blues and purples predominate in winter, the lighter and more varied colors being generally confined to materials only adapted for summer use. The ladies have a great partiality for crimson crepe, which is generally worn as an underrobe, and peeps daintily out at the bottom of the dress, and at the wide open sleeves. It is also entwined in the hair, and with the girdle, at the back of which it is allowed to droop in full, graceful folds. The men do not affect such bright colors as the women and children, although their robes are often fantastically embroidered with various strange devices, such as shellfish, frogs, flowers and landscapes, some of which are beautifully worked. Mother and child. From photograph. Mother and child. From photograph. The whole populace on these occasions seem determined to enjoy themselves. The air of good-natured contentment, which characterizes them at all times, taking a more exuberant tone as they stroll about the streets, visit in family parties, or make excursions to the neighboring tea-houses. Thoroughly domestic in their tastes and habits, it is a pleasing sight to watch the family groups. Here a grand dame is carefully assisted along by her son and daughter-in-law, preceded by chattering grandchildren in the gayest of dresses, tugging at extraordinary kites, or a father, in the doorway of his house, nurses one child, while the mother exhibits for the admiration of sympathizing friends another infant, probably one of the unconscious objects of all this rejoicing. Though the men frequently exceed the bounds of sobriety on these festivals and holidays, they rarely become quarrelsome. It is, however, by no means unusual for them to keep in a state of intoxication for days, alleging this, with perfect sang-froid, as an excuse for any neglected promise or unfinished job. The Omatsuri or Merchants' Great Festival, which is only celebrated in the principal towns, takes place about the middle of July, and may be considered to be an exhibition of the different trades, as the merchants and craftsmen of the country show the choicest specimens of their wares and handicraft in a kind of trades procession. Like all the rest of their festivals, it has a religious signification, the people believing that misfortunes in business are warded off by it. Upwards of 500 trade trophies figure in one of these processions, the imposing nature of which may be imagined from the gorgeous materials and fantastic dresses depicted in the illustration. The car in the foreground bears the trophy of the wax figure makers, whose trade is one of the most lucrative in Japan, as the Japanese not only perpetuate their celebrities by waxwork effigies, but the majority of the people, being professors of the Shinto religion, have lares and penates of the same material, called kamis, which are supposed to intercede on their behalf with the Supreme Being. And this is in addition to regular waxwork exhibitions, which are very popular, and the sale of toys which are hawked about the country by traveling dealers. Otintalama traveling merchant, native drawing. Traveling merchant, native drawing. The merchants have a general right of entry to all parts of the town on these occasions. In the illustration, the procession is passing through the official quarter of Udo, the tycoon's palace forming the subject of the background. They halt from time to time in their progress, which is enlivened by songs descriptive of their various callings, and the beating of huge drums, and blowing of strange discordant instruments. There is a kind of analogy between our industrial exhibitions and these festivals, and, whatever the purpose may be for which they were originated, it is plain that they admirably represent the industry, wealth, and resources of the country. Ottintosoma is a comical divinity, who is laughed at by some, and believed by others to inhabit certain miniature temples, which are crowned with cocks with outspread wings, as that bird is supposed to be his favorite incarnation. On holidays and festivals, his temples are frequently carried about on the shoulders of his votaries, who are generally the most ignorant and superstitious of the people. This is always a subject of merriment with the unbelievers, who crowd round the temples and oppose their progress, and indulge in witticisms at the expense of the divinity and his bearers. This sometimes leads to a disturbance, but only when the parties concerned have been indulging too freely in their favorite sake. Sake drunk. Native drawing. Sake drunk. Native drawing. The intercession of Ottintosoma is principally sought in times of drought or of heavy rains, the temple in the one case being brought out and exposed to the sun, and in the other sprinkled with water, by way of intimating the immediate necessity for his good offices. Chapter 2. Fires and fire brigades. Fires are necessarily frequent, as the majority of the houses are constructed of wood, and such dangerous articles as paper lanterns, small charcoal fireboxes, and movable open stoves, for household purposes, are in common use. The candles burnt in the paper lanterns render them extremely dangerous, as they are fixed by a socket inside the lower end of the candle, which fits on a peg in the lantern, generally very loosely, and as they flare a great deal, very little wind or motion will cause a conflagration. Fires are mostly attributed, however, to the kebak or small charcoal firebox, which is used for smoking purposes. It is placed on a small stand in the middle of the thickly matted rooms, the smokers sitting round drinking sake, and occasionally filling their small pipes. Their method of smoking, like all the rest of their habits, is remarkably peculiar, for, after inhaling a few whiffs, the smoker invariably knocks out the half-consumed remnant on the kebak and, presently refilling, commences another pipe, and so on, 2 or 3 times in succession, rarely troubling himself about the ashes of the last, which the slightest current of air may carry unperceived to smoulder in the combustible flooring. A fire brigade on its way to a fire. A fire brigade on its way to a fire. Fires occur frequently, notwithstanding the great precautions which are taken for their prevention. Town and country are divided into districts, for which certain of the inhabitants are responsible. Each of these has its alarum, with observatory and regular watchers, while every guard-house is provided with a supply of ladders, buckets, and other necessary implements. Whenever a gale is coming on, the Yoshonjai and Kanabo or watch and fire lookouts, who on ordinary occasions only go their rounds by night, parade the towns with rattles and clanking iron instruments, as a warning to the people to keep their fires low. They have numerous fire brigades, which are well organized, and remarkably efficient. In the illustration, one of them is seen hurrying along the street to the place of action. On the right, a watchman is striking an alarm, and another may be noticed, halfway up an observatory in the distance, pointing out the direction of the fire. The white building on the other side of the street is a fireproof storehouse, in which the public documents and valuables of the district are deposited whenever a fire breaks out in it. Yoshonjai and Kanabo. Native drawing. Yoshonjai and Kanabo. Native drawing. A Japanese shekase or fire brigade, passing silently along the streets, lighted by its weird red and black distinguishing lanterns, is a strange sight. Some of its members wear armor, with helmets and black lacquered iron visors, and carry mato or fire charms and various necessary implements. Others are clad in head and shoulder pieces and gauntlets of light chain armor, to protect them while pulling down and unroofing houses, which is their especial duty. All have a regular fire costume, from the oki-yokonin or headman to the bare-legged coolie, who carries the badge of the brigade in large red characters on his back. On arriving at a fire, a point de tête is selected, generally a house, on the roof of which the fire charms are immediately fixed, as if to forbid its further advance. These charms, the circular white objects with black moldings, have, of course, as little effect on one element as Canute's celebrated command had on another, but the people put such faith in their virtue that their presence is a powerful auxiliary in prescribing the limits of fires, which are rarely allowed to pass the bounds marked out by them. The firemen fight with the flames as they close on the charms, like men determined to stand by their colors to the last, rushing into the burning houses, pulling them down, and drenching the blazing thatch, with great courage and endurance. When, by thus putting their shoulder to the wheel, the fire is fairly subdued, they turn round and point exultingly to the Mato as the Hercules that has procured the result. On one occasion, at a fire in the village of Omura, adjoining Yokohama, the charms and their supporters were actually licked by the flames from the house opposite to that on which they were fixed, whose thatched roof was pulled off while in a state of rampant ignition by fire coolies, who with bare hands, and no other protection than their saturated clothing, fought with the actual fire. One plucky fellow fell through the roof while thus employed, and, as the spectators still shuddered at his anticipated fate, rushed out apparently uninjured, and, reascending, resumed his fiery task with unabated vigor. Although the fire charms were triumphant on this occasion, they did not escape unscorched, and several engines had to be kept in constant play upon them and their supporters, to prevent the one from ignition, and the other from being baked in their armor like crabs in their shells. The engines in present use are made of wood, and, though simple, are efficient in damping the roofs of houses, which, being tiled with thin squares of wood, are very inflammable, putting out embers, and playing upon the firemen, who, as already indicated, prefer being stewed to being roasted. The Japanese, however, are thoroughly aware of the superiority of our engines, which will probably soon take the place of their own, as the people are singularly quick in availing themselves of anything useful. The townspeople generally calculate on being burnt out once in every 7 years, and whenever this calamity falls upon them, no time is lost in rebuilding. For instance, in December 1864, a fragment of blazing wood, from a fire which destroyed the United Service Club at Yokohama, was blown across to the village of Omura before alluded to, which was half burnt down, greatly endangering the General Smallpox Hospital and the huts of the Royal Marine Battalion in its rear. But early next morning, while the embers of the old houses were still smoking, new ones were in course of erection, and before night some of the industrious occupants were fairly roofed in afresh. 2 Chapter 3. Domestic life. It is impossible to mark the even and peaceable tenor of Japanese life, the politeness, industry, respect for superiors, and general air of cheerfulness and content, that pervades all classes, without admiration of the wise regulations which preserve such order amongst them as a people. Quarrels and blows are almost unknown in families. The husband is gentle, the wife exemplary and affectionate, and the children singularly obedient and reverent to their parents, yet spare the rod and spoil the child is a precept totally disregarded. The children are never beaten, nor do the parents allow themselves to lose their tempers in rebuking them, however great the provocation may be. One remarkable result of the complete self-abnegation inculcated by their social system. A Japanese wedding, the relative position of father and son is very striking. From an early age the latter enjoys the entire confidence of the former, who not only treats him as a grown-up person, but frequently refers disputed matters to his arbitration, invariably abiding by his decision. Again, on a son's arriving at manhood, the parents often resign their property in his favor, relying on him, with a confidence rarely misplaced, for maintenance during the remainder of their lives, and so sacred is this trust considered, that in case of the son's demise it devolves indisputably on his wife and children. So far, what could be more promising? But, alas! Like everything else, Japanese life has a dark side, and in this case it consists of a repulsive custom, which permits indigent parents to sell their daughters for a term of years into a state of bondage, for purposes of the most degrading nature. This possibility more than counterbalances all the brighter features of their domestic economy. Generally speaking, when young girls find themselves a burden to their parents, they seek employment in the tea houses, where they are well looked after and instructed in various accomplishments, for which they serve a certain apprenticeship, and at its expiration generally marry, as girls so educated are eagerly sought after. There are two forms of marriage, either of which is legally binding. One is a religious, and the other a civil contract, not very dissimilar from our marriage by the registrar, saving that the bride's parents sign for her. Whichever form is used, the parents receive a sum of money from the bridegroom, but in neither case is the husband supposed to see the face of his bride until all due formalities have been performed. The religious ceremony takes place in a temple. The pair, after listening to a lengthy harangue from one of the attendant priests, approach the altar, where large tapers are presented to them. The bride, instructed by the priest, lights her taper at the sacred censer on the altar, and the bridegroom, igniting his from hers, allows the two flames to combine, and burn steadily together, thus symbolizing the perfect unity of the marriage state, and this completes the ceremonial. The illustration represents the private ratification of the civil contract, which is a simple form, by which the parties take upon themselves the respective duties of husband and wife. The veiled figure in white is the Hanayomi or bride in the act of acknowledging the Hanamoko or bridegroom, who sits opposite to her in an official dress, by partaking of the nuptial sake. This sake or wine is prepared by two intimate female friends of the bride, who first pour it into the gold and silver lacquer vessels on the stand, which respectively represent the husband and wife, and then, taking the vessels in hand, mix the contents in a cup, and deliver it to the shirin or master of the ceremonies, who hands it to the bride, and then to the bridegroom, and both partake of the contents, which act constitutes the marriage. A dose of moxa. Native drawing. A dose of moxa. Native drawing. Although young ladies are employed to mix the nuptial sake, they do not attend on the bride. Such offices as are required are performed by a married couple, the shirin and his wife. It is they who make the necessary arrangements, and provide the pheasants that appear in the recess, which signify that the Hanamoko, like the cock pheasant, will always jealously guard his charmer, who, like the shy hen bird, will readily respond to the call of her mate. A more practical idea of the requirements of married life may be deduced from the annexed woodcut, representing the application of moxa, which is very commonly used as a remedy for rheumatism, and to promote circulation. Japanese women make excellent wives. They are never idle in their houses, and when other occupations fail them, the spinning wheel, or loom, is brought out, and materials for clothing their families are prepared. In the country, the women share equally with their husbands and children in agricultural labors. Early and late whole families may be seen in the paddy fields transplanting rice, or superintending its irrigation, for which the undulating nature of the country affords great facility. Transplanting rice. Native drawing. Transplanting rice. Native drawing. Notwithstanding the laborious nature of their tasks, they have always a cheerful greeting for the passerby, even under extremely irritating circumstances, as they are greatly plagued by leeches, which swarm in the paddy fields. The result of the constant attention paid to the cultivation of the soil is astonishing. Our farmers would gaze with surprise on the luxuriant crops of cereals, roots, and vegetables, and this is solely owing to the care taken in preparing the soil, which is not naturally productive. Weeds are never to be met with in the fields, which, however, from the constant manuring bestowed upon them, lack the sweet fresh smell of our own. With regard to education, it is rare to meet with a Japanese who cannot read, write, and cipher, and in buying and selling they use computing slides like the Chinese, by the aid of which they quickly settle the amount to be paid. They do not, except in the higher classes, receive what we understand by a general or scientific education, the members of each trade or profession being only instructed in what pertains to their own affairs, a fact the inquiring stranger soon discovers. Chapter 4. The Tycoon, Daimyos, and Aristocracy. The government of Japan consists of an oligarchy of feudal princes, called daimyos, wielding absolute authority in their respective provinces, but subject to the general control of one of their number, selected from one of three great families, called the Tycoon, who, assisted by a Gorigio or Great Council, presides over the affairs of the state in the name of the Mikado or spiritual emperor, its supreme head. The office of Mikado is apparently the cause of most of the disturbances which agitate the country. Its temporal importance lies in possessing the power of issuing decrees, bestowing titles, and delegating authority to others, and princes discontented with the Tycoon are constantly intriguing against his legitimate influence with the Mikado. For instance, an attempt was made in 1864 by a powerful coalition, headed by Choiseul, Prince of Nagato, to obtain possession of the Mikado's person. This was only prevented after a severe struggle by the bravery of the Tycoon's guard, to whose care the palace and its inmates were entrusted. During the conflict, a large portion of the sacred city of Miyako was burnt. A daimyo paying a state visit. The Tycoon only leaves Yedo when affairs of state require his presence elsewhere. His palace is situated in the heart of the city, and is surrounded by grounds several miles in circumference, and enclosed by a deep moat. It is there that he receives the compulsory visits of the grandees of the empire, one of whom, on the point of being ushered into the audience chamber, is shown opposite, in his robes of ceremony, and attended by a sword-bearer, in token of his high rank. The bonze, or priest, who precedes him, does not impart any religious signification to the visit, as priests commonly act in the double capacity of spy and master of the ceremonies. The screen, which forms the background of the illustration, is worthy of attention, as its subject is taken from the Japanese mythology, and represents the great sun god from whom Tenzero Daizin, the patron goddess of the empire, sprang. In public, these oligarchical princes are invariably surrounded by all the pomp of feudal state, and when they travel are escorted by large bodies of retainers. At Kanagawa, which adjoins the settlement of Yokohama, the foreigner has frequent opportunities of witnessing their processions as they pass to and fro along the Tokaido or Great Public Road when they are going on their compulsory visits to Yedo from their own country palaces. Nor is much danger attached to this, as the passing of daimyos whom it would be dangerous to meet on the Tokaido is always notified by the authorities to the consul. On witnessing a daimyo's procession for the first time, it is hard to realize that it is not a scene from some gorgeous pantomime. Brilliant and varied are the costumes of the retainers, and so totally different is it from anything which European eyes are accustomed to gaze upon. But should anything excite the risible faculties of the observer, his hallucinations are likely to be quickly scattered by the scowls of the resolute-looking fellows passing by with hand on sword, needing but little encouragement to set a glory to it, by giving it the worship of revenge, as they are extremely jealous of the honor of their prince, and regard the presence of foreigners on the Tokaido at such times as an insult. This circumstance is also rendered more galling by foreigners sitting coolly on their horses by the roadside as the great man passes, generally in a low norimon, on which they must necessarily look down, in contradiction to Japanese etiquette, which permits no inferior to look down upon a superior, while the people of the country are either abjectly kowtowing to him or patiently waiting in their closed houses until his passing shall set them once more at liberty. A review given by two ministers for foreign affairs to Sir Rutherford Alcock, shortly before his departure, was a very imposing spectacle. The approach of the ministers was announced by the beating of drums, which are sometimes carried on the shoulder and struck by the palm of the hand, and the blowing of conch shells, each instrument being sounded 3 times in succession, at short intervals. Men in armor carrying banners, bearing the Tycoon's crest, headed the procession. They were followed by a large drum in a square case, carried by 2 men, and the conch blowers. Then came a number of spearmen in armor, officers on horseback immediately preceding the ministers. On arriving at the ground they dismounted, and were received by Sir Rutherford Alcock, the remainder of their retinue passing on and forming in rear of the others, to the left of the English garrison, consisting of the 2nd Battalion of the 20th Regiment, the Royal Marine Battalion, and detachments of Royal Artillery, of the 67th Regiment, and Baluchis, who were drawn up in brigade in honor of the occasion. At the request of the ministers the garrison marched past and performed a few maneuvers, concluding with discharging blank cartridge in squares and in skirmishing order. The rapidity of the fire appeared to make a great impression on them. This over, the Japanese performance commenced, which was a representation of their ancient order of battle, the retainers dividing and forming in lines opposite one another, and about 100 yards apart. The proceedings were conducted by 2 marshals on foot. They began by forming the spearmen in line, with emphatic guttural commands, stamping of the feet, and flourishing of gilt batons, to the end of which wisps of paper were attached. All were habited in magnificent armor. Some wore complete suits of mail, others chain armor, lined with gorgeous silks. Broad lacquered hats were here and there substituted for helmets, or both were dispensed with, and the temples of the combatants bound with linen cloth, which is their usual headdress in action. Presently a signal was given, on which the opposing lines commenced simultaneously to mark line double. At a second signal they faced into Indian file, and the marshals, placing themselves at their head, led them off at a swinging trot, the whole party flinging up their heels like boys playing at follow my leader, until startling guttural shouts from the marshals caused the glittering lines to halt and face each other. The horsemen, who had hitherto taken no part in the pageant, were now stationed in rear of the center of the respective lines, and added greatly to the effect by their crested helmets, their richly gilt armor, and the heraldic banners, which were attached to the back of the cuirass and floated about 2 feet over their heads. As soon as the horsemen were stationed the exciting part of the sham fight began. by the lines being wheeled backwards and forwards in wings from the center, and into zigzag formations from central points, with a slow stamp-and-go march, the spears being flourished with each motion and pointed high and low, and right and left, as in our bayonet exercise. The marshals regulated the movements of their respective lines with great accuracy, the one being retired directly the other advanced, so that the relative distance was never altered. After a time both parties suddenly assumed a sitting posture and exchanged howls of defiance, which grew fiercer and fiercer, until a simultaneous rush, as if to engage, finished the performance, from which the representatives of barbaric warfare retired amid the hearty cheers of the representatives of the bayonet and rifle. A daimyo retainer. Native drawing. A daimyo retainer. Native drawing. Though most of the daimyos have enormous revenues, and are surrounded by men devotedly attached to them, the policy of the country so trammels their actions with formalities and espionage as to keep them in considerable subjection to the tycoon, nor is even the privacy of their houses respected, for their families are retained in Yedo, as hostages for their good behavior, while they are absent in their principalities. As an occasional relaxation from the cares attendant on their high position, they avail themselves of a privilege called naibin, which enables them to share incognito in the pleasures and amusements of their countrymen. Those drawings and colored representations of scenes connected with the higher classes which so largely engross the attention of Japanese artists, generally depict naibin intrigues and adventures. These convey, however, a very exaggerated idea of the manner in which the daimyos conduct themselves on these occasions. Coolies carrying norimon. From native drawing. Coolies carrying norimon. From native drawing. The family in the houseboat witnessing a pyrotechnic display in the Bay of Yedo may be regarded as a faithful representation of a daimyo's party enjoying the naibin. The great man in his light summer robe has apparently cast aside the cares of office, and seems thoroughly to enjoy the cool evening breeze and the society of his wives, only one of whom has a legal claim to that title, by right of which she takes precedence of the others. Of the two bonzes, or priests, in the stem of the boat, one, probably, is a member of the family, and the other its spy, for even naibin excursions are not exempted from espionage. Indeed, the Japanese are so habituated to this custom that they generally regard it as a necessary check upon themselves. Naibin excursions to the tea houses are very frequent, notice being sent previously in order to ensure proper accommodation and privacy, the latter precaution being principally taken on account of the ladies of the family, who never go beyond the palace except in a norimon guarded by armed retainers. A daimyo and family witnessing fireworks. A daimyo and family witnessing fireworks in their homes. The aristocracy are as simple in their habits as the rest of the people. They are much given to study, the favorite subjects being poetry, history, astronomy, and logic. The children are usually taught the rudiments of education by their mothers, and as they advance in years, are either privately instructed by masters or sent to the great schools at Miyako, which are said to be attended by upwards of 4,000 scholars. Chapter V. The Court of the Mikado. The spiritual emperor of Japan is supposed to be a direct descendant of the gods, and as such enjoys the adoration, as well as the fealty of his subjects. Unfortunately, his divine attributes deprive him of the free exercise of his human functions, as his feet are never permitted to touch the ground out of doors, nor is he allowed to cut his hair, beard, or nails, or to expose himself to the rays of the sun, which would detract from the excellency of his person. His principal titles are Zenzi, Son of Heaven, Mikado, Emperor, and Derai or Kinrei, Grand Interior, the latter denoting the perpetual seclusion of his person. It is said that his ancestry can be traced in an unbroken line from nearly 700 years before the Christian era. The Mikado never goes beyond the precincts of the imperial residence, which occupies a large portion of the city of Miyako, comprising numerous palaces and gardens, and connected with it are the schools alluded to in the last chapter, which are established on the plan of a university, and are much resorted to by the children of the nobility. A minister of the Mikado on a religious expedition. A minister of the Mikado on a religious expedition. Whenever this great personage wishes to take an airing, he is carried by 14 men in a large norimon with latticed windows, through which he is able to see without being seen, and even when granting an audience he is said to be concealed from view by bamboo screen work. His court consists of the members of his own family and certain great officers of state appointed by the tycoon, who nominally receive and promulgate his commands, but, in ordinary times, he has no real power in the temporal affairs of the empire, and only refuses to confer legality on the acts of his lieutenant under the pressure of intrigue, or of undue family influence. To relieve the wearisome monotony of his life, as well as to prevent the possibility of the sacred race becoming extinct, he is allowed 12 wives, who are chosen from the most beautiful daughters of the chief princes of the empire. These ladies occupy separate palaces in the immediate vicinity of his, where they are attended by their own retainers, but only one of them enjoys the rank of empress, although they are all treated with the deference due to royalty. He is also said to have an unlimited number of concubines, who reside within the bounds of the imperial establishment. The distinctive mark of the members of the Mikado's court and of the ladies of his family consists of 2 black patches placed on the forehead, and in the arrangement of the hair, which is gathered up in a long queue and curved over the head by one sex, and worn disheveled and without any kind of ornament by the other. Though the Mikado has little influence in the secular affairs of state, his authority in religious questions is supreme, but it is doubtful if he personally takes any part in the solemnities which are constantly occurring at Miyako. The subject of illustration represents one of these sacred observances. The procession is coming from the Mikado's palace, which, properly speaking, is a temple, being full of idols and effigies of the kamis or canonized saints. The principal figure is the 3rd Minister of State, and from this circumstance the white dresses worn by the Kagadi or fire-bearers and the presence of some of the imperial children, it is probably a midnight pilgrimage to some neighboring shrine, in honor of the manes of a departed member of the family. The early education of the Mikado's children is entrusted to the ladies of the court. The sons, while still young, are sent to different religious fraternities, and the daughters, on attaining a suitable age, are bestowed in marriage on the nobles of the country, except the eldest, who is appointed chief priestess of the temple of the sun at Ise, which contains the shrine of Tenzero Daizin, to which all Japanese are supposed to make a pilgrimage once in their lifetime. A begging criminal. Native drawing. A begging criminal. Native drawing. The Mikado is said to spend the greatest portion of his time in the society of his wives, who contribute to his amusement by singing, dancing, and theatrical entertainments. The latter sometimes take place in the open air, as in the scene depicted opposite, on which the grand interior and a select party are supposed to be looking down through the jalousies of the palace. The vocal, instrumental, and theatrical talents of the performers are here called into play, the arena for the latter being the makoshi or movable stage, in which a female figure may be noticed declaiming her part. The long-handled, fantastically colored umbrellas belong to the imperial attendants taking part in the theatricals, whose hair, it will be noticed, is arranged according to court etiquette. The men whose features are concealed by their broad hats are ninseki or public singers. Generally speaking, they belong to the aristocratic class, and are reduced to earn their livelihood in this manner in consequence of some misdemeanor, on account of which their property has been forfeited to the state. Their occupation is in itself a punishment, as Japanese gentlemen never sing, regarding that accomplishment as derogatory to their dignity. A certain class of criminals also wear a disguise of this nature, as shown in the woodcut. Theatrical performance in front of the Mikado's palace, /div. Theatrical performance in front of the Mikado's palace. Ladies of the Mikado's court performing the butterfly dance. Ladies of the Mikado's court performing the butterfly dance. The band here represented is much stronger than those that generally figure in Japanese orchestral and theatrical entertainments. Music is not used, as with us, to fill the interval between the pieces, but accompanies the performers throughout, the louder instruments being energetically struck as the singing becomes impassioned or the actors declamatory. Lady waiting on the Mikado. From photograph. Lady waiting on the Mikado. From photograph. The butterfly dance is another specimen of the amusements with which the ladies of the Mikado's court while away their monotonous existence. As here shown, it is a private performance, of which the Empress and her principal attendants are the only spectators. The insects are personated by two of her ladies, who mimic their motions and sing praises of the different flowers they pretend to alight upon, to the accompaniment of a band of fair musicians. But the most interesting part of the affair is a spirited dialogue, in which they cleverly criticize, under floral appellations, the different ladies of the court, in a manner equally gratifying and flattering to their royal mistress. The Mikado is always waited upon by the ladies of his court, and is said never to eat twice from the same vessels, which are broken to pieces as they are removed. An intelligent yokonin, however, on being questioned about this point, was much amused, and, though he professed ignorance of the subject, was evidently very skeptical on the matter of the dishes. Chapter 6. The Harakiru. Although we have long been aware of the existence of this peculiar mode of suicide, the exclusive policy of the Japanese has placed insuperable difficulties in the way of obtaining accurate information concerning it. A more enlightened policy is now gaining ground in the country. The chromolithographs that illustrate these sketches are facsimiles of paintings by native artists, selected from a series lately published at Yedo, and sold to foreigners with the connivance, if not by permission, of the authorities, for the spy system in Japan is so perfect that illicit dealings are next to impossible. As Japanese punishments entail disgrace on every member of the culprit's family, the harakiru or happy dispatch, which is the only exception, is regarded as a great privilege by the classes entitled to avail themselves of it. These consist of the nobility, military, and official of a certain rank holding civil appointments. It seems to be a prevalent idea that this sacrifice is reserved for political offenses, but this is not the case, as crimes of all descriptions are condoned by it. A simple act of suicide does not constitute the harakiru. To render the act legal, and to ensure the heir and family of the person performing it against disgrace and loss of property, an order for its performance must be issued by the tycoon, or by the suzerain prince of the culprit. The Japanese, being a high-spirited and patriotic people, consider that death under any circumstances is preferable to dishonor, and the privileged classes always carry about with them when they travel the paraphernalia used at the performance of the harakiru in token of their readiness to prove their patriotism, or to die rather than disgrace their family. The dress consists of a robe and harakama or winged official dress of coarse white cloth, white being the funeral color of the country, which is undistinguished by the crest or any sign of the rank of the owner. There is also the disemboweling knife, the blade of which is about 8 inches long, and very sharp. When the sentence of the harakiru is awarded, or the humble request of a defeated politician to perform it is acceded to, a formal document is made out and duly signed by the competent authorities. It is then delivered to 2 commissioners, by whom it is conveyed to the culprit. Should the proposed victim be a daimyo of importance, and sufficiently powerful to set the tycoon at defiance, the delivery of the imperial mandate is likely to be attended with unpleasant results, as the bearers are sometimes waylaid and murdered by retainers of the doomed prince, and have frequently to resort to stratagem to accomplish their task. But when once the mandate is delivered, the prince must submit, or he would lose caste even with his own followers. So strongly are the Japanese imbued with respect for the ancient customs of their country. The accompanying illustrations represent the different formalities that are observed at the performance of the harakiru by a daimyo. On receiving the official intimation of his sentence, he orders the necessary preparations to be made, and informs his friends and relatives of it, inviting them to share in a parting carouse with him. On the appointed day, after taking a private farewell of his family, he receives his friends. He is habited in his white robes, and supported by two of his relatives or ministers, similarly attired. When the time arrives, which is previously arranged with the commissioners, he takes leave of the guests, as on any ordinary occasion, and enters the screened enclosure, accompanied by his supporters. It will be noticed that the retainers guarding the exterior and entrance are barefooted, which is a mark of respect in honor of the rank of the culprit, and of the solemnity of the occasion. The tycoon's messengers reading the sentence. The tycoon's messengers reading the sentence. The tycoon's messengers then read the imperial mandate, which proclaims that, in accordance with the ancient custom of the country, the daimyo is permitted honorably to sacrifice himself for its benefit, and thus to expiate in his own person the crime or offense he has committed against the welfare of the state. In the illustration, the two officials charged with this disagreeable office are sitting opposite the daimyo and his friends, reading the fatal document, their suite surrounding them in respectful attitudes. The whole party wear the official dress, which intimates at once the respect due to the victim and the official nature of the ceremony. The sacrifice. The second scene shows the daimyo on the point of performing the sacrificial ceremony. His forelock is reversed, as a sign of submission to his fate, and to assist the executioner, who, as soon as his master goes through the form of disemboweling himself with the knife on the stand, will, with one blow of his razor-edged sword, complete the sacrifice by decapitation. Only the two chief commissioners appointed by the tycoon, and the sorely tasked supporters of the victim, remain to witness the last act of the drama. The rest of the party await its completion in the adjoining compartment of the enclosure, which is expressly constructed for that purpose. The funeral procession, which is the subject of the next scene, is accompanied by all the pomp indicative of the high position of the deceased. The mourners wear robes of white cloth, and all the feudal paraphernalia are draped with the same material, which, as before mentioned, is used in Japanese mourning. The coffin is carried near the head of the procession. It is a square box of resinous wood, covered over with white, and the body is placed in it in a sitting posture. A daimyo's funeral. A daimyo's funeral. All the members of the family attend the funeral, either on foot or in norimons. If the wife and the heir be absent in Yedo, they are represented by the nearest relations. In this instance both are present, from which it may be inferred that the sacrificial act has taken place in the neighborhood of Yedo. Cremation of the body. Cremation of the body. Although the Japanese sometimes bury their dead, they generally practice cremation. Repulsive as this custom is to European ideas, it must be remembered that the Japanese are not singular in preferring it, as several of the most civilized nations of antiquity considered it the most honorable mode of disposing of the bodies of the dead. While the body is being reduced to ashes, the priests tell their beads and chant prayers for the soul of the departed, as the followers of almost every religious sect in Japan believe in a state of purgatory. The last scene shows the wife and son of the victim of the harakiri collecting his ashes and depositing them in an earthenware jar. This is afterwards sealed down and conveyed to the cemetery, or temple, which contains the remains of his ancestors. Relatives collecting ashes. Some of the Japanese cemeteries are very extensive, and they are generally situated in secluded, picturesque spots, in the neighborhood of the towns and villages. The graves are small, round, cemented receptacles, just large enough to receive the jar containing the ashes. If the body is buried, which only happens when the deceased is friendless, or too poor to pay the expenses of cremation, the head is always placed pointing to the north. The tombstones are ordinarily about 3 feet high, and are either square or circular in shape, resting on square pedestals, in which small holes are cut to contain rice and water. The supplies of these are replenished from time to time, generally by the women of the family, lest the spirit of the deceased should revisit its grave and imagine itself neglected. Sometimes flowers are placed before the graves, and flowering sprigs of peach and plum are stuck in the ground about them. Like the Chinese, the Japanese burn joss sticks to propitiate the deities in favor of their departed relatives, and the neighborhood of a graveyard may generally be detected by the peculiar aromatic odor emitted during the burning of these. For some time after a funeral, the relatives daily visit the tomb and intercede for the dead, holding their hands up in the attitude of prayer, and rubbing the palms together as they mutter their monotonous orisons. Chapter 7. National Games and Amusements. Notwithstanding the industrious habits of the Japanese, they are great lovers of pleasure, and much addicted to sightseeing. Theaters and waxwork exhibitions are very numerous, and jugglers, top spinners, and tumblers are regular habitués of the streets. Though they do not allow pleasure to come before business, they do not hesitate to associate it with religious observances, and on solemn festival occasions, the vicinity of even the most sacred temples is occupied by a variety of shows and common stalls, for the sale of sweetmeats, toys, and colored pictures. Their principal athletic amusement is wrestling, which may be regarded as the national game of the country. It is very generally practiced, and pairs of brawny fellows are to be frequently met with of an evening in the outskirts of towns and villages, either crouched down in the preliminary attitude, which resembles that of angry fighting cocks, or dragging one another to and fro like frogs struggling over a choice morsel. The game is necessarily a dragging and pulling one, its grand object being to force the opponent beyond a certain boundary. So popular is it, that in addition to public performers, who travel about the country exhibiting their prowess, the daimyos keep private bands. Each district has some especial champion, and every Japanese a favorite smoo as they term the wrestlers, whose exploits are canvassed with an enthusiasm totally at variance with the stolid indifference which usually characterizes the people, when any subject is broached that does not directly concern their ordinary vocations. The professional wrestlers are generally men of Herculean proportions. From constant practice they attain a muscular development that would eclipse that of our prize ring champions, but their paunchy figures and sluggish movements render any further comparison impossible, as they neither practice nor appreciate what we call training. Size and weight are prized more than activity in the limited arena to which their performances are confined, so, instead of walking down superabundant flesh, they endeavor to increase it, dieting themselves on rice and fish, which is far from productive of any Bantingite result. The illustration of the great wrestling amphitheater at Yedo conveys a fair idea of the estimation in which athletic games are held by the Japanese. The enclosure is capable of containing several thousand spectators, and is always filled when a match of importance takes place. In the center is the doko or boundary ring, which is about 18 feet in diameter. The game is generally decided by one or other of the combatants being forced against this boundary, for, although a fair throw counts, it rarely decides the mastery, as the great weight and the crouching position of the wrestlers necessitate dragging, pushing, and even carrying, and the tenacity of their grasp is such, that any other results are almost impossible. The price of admission to these exhibitions is very low, and, like everything else of a public nature, is regulated by the government. Officials are appointed to superintend the arrangements, and to see that no accidents arise from overcrowding. For this purpose they are provided with a box that overlooks the whole building. The lofty scaffolding outside the enclosure is a time stage, from which the commencement and duration of each match are intimated to the audience by a certain number of strokes on the drum that surmounts it. Public wrestling in the Great Amphitheater at Yedo. Public wrestling in the Great Amphitheater at Yedo. Before each wrestling match commences, the GOG or judge who superintends it, shouts out the names and exploits of the contenders, who, after kowtowing very ceremoniously to one another, rise to the preliminary attitude. At a signal from the judge the combatants commence. At first they move cautiously about the center of the ring, watching a favorable opportunity to close, which they presently do with deep guttural exclamations. Then great working of muscle and tugging and straining follow, the spectators cheering on their respective favorites, until the fall of the GOG's fan, which is the moment depicted by the artist, proclaims the victor. Thundering plaudits greet the hero of the occasion, who presently strolls about among the assembled multitude, attended by his koagai or servant who collects the offerings with which they liberally reward his exertions. When money fails, articles of clothing are frequently bestowed, and sometimes too freely, as it is by no means unusual for both sexes to half denude themselves at these exhibitions, and it is a favorite joke with the women to send their male friends to redeem the articles from the wrestler. Although fencing is a military exercise, it is so commonly practiced by the Japanese yokoninari or soldiery, who comprise a large portion of the population, and is entered into by them in so spirited a manner, that it deserves to be classed as an amusement. Yokonin's fencing. Yokonin's fencing. The woodcut is a very faithful representation of Yokonin's fencing. The masks cover the whole of the head, and the arms, breast, and hips are protected by cuirass, petticoat, and sea of leather ribbed with bamboo. The fencing sticks are of the same length as the obito de katana or great fighting sword. They are made of split canes, bound tightly together, and are used with both hands. The Japanese fence well, and deliver their points with great precision, especially an awkward downward thrust at the breast. They deliver their cuts and points with fierce guttural exclamations, which are peculiarly disagreeable to European ears, especially when the listener is located in the vicinity of a guardhouse, whose occupants notify their employment at daybreak with such cries as "Hi! RH! Atra-H! That's at! That's into you!" and continue this information, accompanied by the clashing of their sticks, and occasional chuckles, until late in the afternoon. The Japanese are great frequenters of the theaters, of the interior of one of which the illustration is a very good representation. The exterior is generally very like that of the temples, and in some, the ground floor is laid out with miniature lakes and bridges, the audience looking down on the performance from lateral and opposite galleries. Interior of a theater. Interior of a theater. The stage is a little smaller than ours, but sometimes has a promenade through the center of the theater, which facilitates byplay, to which the Japanese attach great importance. The body of the house is divided into boxes, which are generally taken by family parties, who bring their provisions with them and remain all day, as the performances begin about 10 a.m. and last until late in the evening. Their plays are very tedious, although enlivened by a good deal of smart repartee and telling jokes, but the morality even of the most correct is very questionable. Love, of course, is the prevailing feature, and the adventures of the principal heroes contain enough bloodshed and murder to satisfy the most ardent admirer of sensation dramas. In their hand-to-hand encounters they cut and slash at one another with naked swords, which they manage very skillfully, never permitting the blades to come into contact. The female parts are performed by boys and young men, who, with the assistance of paint and powder, make admirable substitutes for women, though singing and dancing girls are frequently introduced as divertissements. Getting ready to go to the theater. Getting ready to go to the theater. Kite flying is also a favorite amusement, and old age and childhood may frequently be seen side by side, tugging at soaring monsters, in the construction of which great ingenuity is displayed. The Japanese often play with cards, which are about a quarter of the size of ours, and they are much given to gambling, although it is strictly prohibited, and, when detected, severely punished. But the most popular indoor game is an sort of combination of draughts and chess, which frequently engrosses the players for hours at a time. Chapter 8. Crimes and Punishments. Crimes against property are rare in Japan, which is owing to the high-spirited and honorable feelings that actuate all classes of the community, but from the feudal nature of the government, the small value attached to life, and the deadly weapons constantly carried, by the military classes, who are notoriously proud and revengeful, crimes against the person are very frequent. A great check upon criminal offenses is the severity of the punishments inflicted, and the disgrace entailed upon the culprit's family. Although the laws are extremely severe, and in their administration there is neither jury nor counsel, justice is delivered with great impartiality, and the judge, who is generally the governor of the town or district in which the offense has been committed, is entrusted with considerable discretionary power. When a prisoner is being examined, his arms are bound to his sides by a rope, which also passes round his neck, the end of which is held by an official, who, if his charge prove unruly, manages him by pulls and jerks. Thrashmano or public exposure is associated with all Japanese punishments, and is said to be in itself a great preventive of crime, as the spirited Japanese dread being held up to the reprobation of their acquaintance more than they fear the extreme penalty of the law. Mode of conducting a criminal to execution. Mode of conducting a criminal to execution. The illustration, showing the mode of conducting a criminal to execution, is an instance of thrashmano. The culprit is bound on a horse, and is preceded by a placard, borne by his relatives or neighbors, and indicating his crime. In this manner he is conducted through the town to the place of execution, where his sentence is read to him. He is then placed, with his limbs still bound, over a freshly dug hole, where he is supported by his relatives till the executioner's sword performs its task. After execution, the heads of malefactors are generally exposed, that of Simono Segai, the Lonin who was decapitated in the presence of the British garrison of Yokohama, for being the organizer of the assassination of Major Baldwin and Lieutenant Byrd of Her Majesty's 20th Regiment, was exhibited on the public stand at the guard-house at the entrance of the town. This man was a fair specimen of the Lonin type, and was a most determined ruffian, whose whole life had been a career of crime. When exposed in the streets of Yokohama the day preceding his execution, he conducted himself with great bravado, remarking on the improvements in the town since he last visited it, and expressing his regret that he had not killed a consul. At the place of execution he made an impassioned speech, in which he declared that he was a gentleman by birth, and had studied the arts and sciences, and never believed the government would sacrifice a Japanese for the death of a foreigner. He said that the days would come when they would repent the encouragement they were now giving to strangers, and ended by complimenting the executioner on his well-known skill. The Lonin differs from the ordinary criminal, and is thus ably described by the highest authority on Japanese matters, for, as a noble or head of a house is responsible for all who are of his family, or claim his protection, when any of his people are resolved upon a desperate enterprise they formally renounce the protection and declare themselves Lonins, in other words, outlaws, or friendless men, after which no one is responsible for their acts, and this is considered a highly honorable and proper thing to do. The worst of this system is, that anyone harboring or assisting a Lonin endangers his head, and such men are, therefore, compelled to resort to robbery and extortion as means of supporting themselves. It generally happens that this legalized method of taking the law into their own hands drives those who avail themselves of it into a series of crimes, and frequently they become the associates of common thieves. Of the gang represented in the illustration as robbing a rich merchant's house, one or two probably are Lonins, the rest being thieves in disguise. Lonins, or outlaws, robbing a rich merchant's house. Lonins, or outlaws, robbing a rich merchant's house. The servants, kowtowing before two men, whose naked swords plainly intimate the consequences of any attempt to give alarm, or to offer resistance to their demands, have apparently been collecting all the money in the house and are laying it before the thieves. The oblong boxes are iron safes, in which the Japanese keep their money. From the position of the other members of the gang, it is evident that they have not got all they require, and are watching something going on in the interior of the house. They have probably learned that the merchant has to forward some money for the purchase of goods by a certain date, and know exactly how much to expect. In the spring of 1865, the tycoon, in levying a tax on the Yedo merchants, congratulated them on the fact that the portion of the country under his immediate control was exempt from the depredations of Lonins. But notwithstanding this statement, a robbery of the nature described took place in the capital immediately after the issue of the tycoon's manifesto, and a Lonin concerned in it gave as an excuse for his conduct that he had learned that the money was intended for foreigners, who were settled in the country in opposition to the laws of Gong and Soma, which had never been revoked. With such dread are these men regarded by the non-combatant classes, that it frequently happens that one or two will go into a village and extort what they require without the slightest resistance being offered. As a rule, Japanese punishments resemble those inflicted by the Chinese, and seem to be based on the Mosaic principle of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Arson, for instance, is punished at the stake, and a thief who endeavors to conceal the results of his robberies by burying them, has the disadvantages of that mode of concealment impressed upon him, by being himself embedded for a day or two in the ground, with only his head out, a mode of instruction that rarely requires a repetition of the lesson. Apropos of this punishment is the testimony of an eyewitness, who, in passing the public execution place at Yedo, noticed a head on the ground, which he supposed to have been recently struck off. He had turned away with a shudder, when a laugh from the bystanders caused him to look again, when, to his great astonishment, the head was vigorously puffing at a pipe which the facetious executioner had a few moments before been smoking himself. The last illustration shows a man and woman undergoing public exposure for adultery, a crime which is rare in Japan and which is punished with great severity. Exposure for infidelity with such detestation is it regarded, that, in addition to all legal cognizance, the husband is permitted, in certain instances, to avenge himself by taking the lives of the offenders upon the spot. The board on the right contains the official intimation of the crime. The curious instruments depicted in the woodcut are Japanese emblems of justice and are to be seen at all the guard houses. They are used to catch runaway offenders or to pin a drunken yokonin against a wall or house, and so facilitate the task of disarming him without danger to the captors. Sodingarami, Satsumata, and Squabo. Sodingarami, Satsumata, and Squabo. Although the Japanese use torture to extract information from obstinate criminals, they employ all necessary caution to preserve life, and a doctor and responsible officer are always present when it is employed, as representatives of the respective claims of humanity and justice. A singular punishment, to which only the nobles of the country are liable, is secret banishment to the island of Fat Sizayu, which is situated on the northern coast of the empire. It is small and barren, rising perpendicularly from the sea. The only communication with it is by means of a basket, which is lowered from an overhanging tree to the water, a distance of about 50 feet. 5 From this island there is no return, and the unhappy, incarcerated nobles are compelled to support themselves by weaving silks, which are the most beautiful the country produces. A junk visits the island once a year, when the silks are exchanged for provisions. Chapter 9. Superstitions and Religious Observances. The Shinto faith and Buddhism are the prevalent religions of the Japanese. The teaching of the other sects is modeled more or less on the tenets inculcated by these two. Some, however, hold a philosophic doctrine, which recognizes a supreme being but denies a future state, holding that happiness is only to be ensured by a virtuous life. Shintoism may be regarded as the national religion of the country. It inculcates a high moral standard, and its chief personage is the Mikado, or spiritual emperor, who is considered to be a mediator between his subjects and the inhabitants of the other world. Every Shinto has the image of a patron kami or saint enshrined in his house, to which he lays open his necessities and confesses his shortcomings, and by whose intercession with the Supreme Being he trusts at his death to be translated to the regions of the kamis as they designate their heaven. The wicked are supposed to be consigned to the abodes of the disembodied spirits, who are punished according to the nature of their crimes. For instance, sake merchants who have sold bad spirit are believed to be confined in stagnant pools, and murderers are supposed to haunt the graves of their victims, until the prayers of their relatives release them. Purity of life and body is the leading feature of the Shinto faith. As an emblem of the natural purity of the soul, mirrors are hung up in the temples, and the more ignorant people, who in Japan, like every other country, are most influenced by superstitions, believe, as they look into the mirror, that the Supreme Being sees their past lives as easily as they do their own faces. The value attached to indulgences and charms is very great, and the sale of them contributes largely to the revenues of the Mikado. Charms are eagerly purchased by the lower orders, who carry them about their persons, and never let anybody touch them except themselves. Selling indulgences by public auction. Selling indulgences by public auction at a tea house at Kamakura. One of these charms was accidentally dropped by a lively little musume or girl who was waiting on a party of foreigners. One of them picked it up, and was on the point of opening the small box in which it is placed for safety when she discovered the loss, and made a desperate rush for its recovery. On finding the importance attached to it, the frisk, as she called it, was handed round the group as she eagerly darted after it, and on one of the party pretending to light a cigar with it she burst into tears, and was not to be pacified until it was restored. A religious observance of great importance with the Japanese is ojurasma, or praying a soul out of purgatory, as they wisely consider that even the most holy must have some small peccadillos to answer for. Praying a soul out of purgatory. Praying a soul out of purgatory. This ceremony takes place in the 7th month after death. A white lamp is its emblem. This is hung up at the entrance of the mourners' houses, while they offer oblations and burn joss sticks. Food is also prepared and laid out, in case the spirit of the departed, finding the journey to the regions of the Kamis a long and wearisome one, should need refreshment. No Japanese dreams of entering a friend's house while the white lamp is hung up, or of disturbing in any way the privacy of a family engaged in these solemn duties, as the spirits of the departed are firmly believed to revisit their former dwellings at such times, if they have not already entered into a state of bliss. In one of their festivals they make pilgrimages at night to the graves of their friends, on which they place food and hang lamps. It is said they believe their ancestors to come from heaven to them on these occasions, and imagine that they return again in small boats, to which they attach lanterns, and which they place on the water at ebb tide, on the evening of the last day of the festival, and eagerly watch, out of sight. An old fisherman, however, who was observed intently watching his frail bark floating out to sea, explained, on being questioned, that he whose lamp burned longest caught most fish, and judging from the old man's solemn manner there was no doubt he had perfect faith in the truth of his statement. However gross their superstitions may be, there is no doubt that they affectionately revere the memory of their dead, and treat them with quite as much respect as the most civilized nation in Christendom. In battle the Japanese always carry off the fallen. At the bombardment of the Shimonoseki forts, at the entrance of the Suwonada, or inland sea in September 1864, Prince Choizayu's loss, according to one of his own officers, amounted to upwards of 500, killed and wounded, but all had been removed when the brigade of English, French, and Dutch, under the command of Colonel Souther, C.B., Royal Marines, took possession of the forts early next day. At the storming of a stockade, which was pluckily defended by 2 battalions of Royal Marines and the light armed companies of the British squadron, the Japanese were noticed carrying away their dead and wounded, and several were unfortunately shot while thus employed. 6 A few nights afterwards large fires were noticed in the interior, which were said to be the funeral pyres of those who had fallen in the defense of the forts and stockade. Sudanji, or last offices. Sudanji, or last offices. The illustration representing the last offices depicts a custom of Buddhist origin which is generally adopted by the Japanese. They believe that shaving the head of the dead propitiates the deities in their favor. It is also considered to be an emblem of sanctity, and the bonzes, or priests, always keep their heads clean shaved. Even children intended for the priesthood, as well as certain religious societies of both sexes, are similarly distinguished. Odder-looking creatures than these bald-headed specimens of humanity can hardly be imagined. The itinerant sweetmeat vendor shown in the woodcut is a specimen of the class of Japanese most prone to superstition. The lantern he carries serves not only to light his way but to advertise his wares. It also bears his name, no Japanese of the lower orders being allowed to stroll about at night without a lantern so distinguished. Itinerant sweetmeat vendor. Native drawing. Itinerant sweetmeat vendor. Native drawing. Chapter X on the Tokaido and in the tea houses. extending over the whole Empire of Japan, regular ferries connecting it with the different islands, is the Tokaido or Imperial High Road, to which occasional reference has been made. Originally constructed at the instigation of a tycoon of more than ordinary abilities, it has, from the constant care bestowed upon it for centuries, each daimyo being compelled to keep that portion of it which passes through his dominions in repair, become a broad and well-graduated highway. It is frequently sheltered by avenues of colossal pines, cryptomerias, and other lofty trees, and small plantations of the graceful bamboo are generally to be seen in the neighborhood of the roadside houses. The scenery is sometimes very lovely. Mountain ranges are to be observed rising one above another, in that wild conglomeration peculiar to volcanic countries, and in the island of Nippon the snowy cone of Fukushima is almost always visible from the higher ground. The hilly country is thickly wooded, but terraces of fields are sometimes cut in the sides, where the formation of the ground permits. The lowlands and valleys are mostly covered with rich crops of cereals, which are watered by natural or artificial streams. As the Tokaido winds along the hilltops, occasional glimpses of the sea meet the eye, often with a series of headlands jutting one beyond another into it, and distant islands dotting the horizon. By the wayside many rare and beautiful ferns are to be seen, and in their seasons, the large white lilies of the country, hydrangeas, violets, orchids, and an endless variety of wild flowers. Carpenters at work. Native drawing. Carpenters at work. Native drawing. Along this beautiful road are constantly passing daimyos and their hosts of retainers, trains of travelers and pilgrims, and a large portion of the island traffic of the empire. As the Tokaido passes through most of the principal towns, the traveler has frequent opportunities of observing the various avocations of the people, for mechanics commonly work in front of their doors, as shown in the woodcut, and in fine weather, the sliding windows through which the Japanese enter their houses are always drawn back, leaving the interior and its occupants open to the road. The baker's shop opposite affords a good specimen of the wayside scenes, and conveys a fair idea of an ordinary Japanese house. It will be noticed that the puppies in the foreground, as well as the cat in the girl's arms, are very differently delineated, but such animals are the especial stumbling blocks of the native artists, although they faithfully represent birds, fishes, and reptiles. A baker's shop, with the exception of the daimyos on their state journeys, who, by the way, have regular halting places at tea houses officially set apart for their use, for the mass of the people to be seen on the Tokaido belong to the lower classes, the aristocracy considering it beneath their dignity to travel for pleasure, or to make pilgrimages. Tea house girl waiting. Native drawing. Tea house girl waiting. Native drawing. Naturally hardy and energetic, the Japanese seem thoroughly to enjoy traveling, which in fine weather has few drawbacks. It is true that the peremptory order, Scenario or down upon your knees at the approach of one of their oligarchical rulers, would be objectionable to Europeans, but the Japanese are accustomed to this, and proceed with their journey after half an hour's detention without being in any way put out by it. The numerous and pleasant tea houses that skirt the Tokaido have a great deal to do with rendering traveling popular. A smiling welcome from the pretty waitresses employed at these places may always be anticipated by the weary wayfarers, and, however slight their requirements may be, they are certain to be promptly and courteously attended to. If the means of travelers do not permit them to resort to the tea houses, there are sheds and stalls at intervals along the road, where they can obtain fruit or refreshments at a trifling cost. Some of the tea houses in the vicinity of large towns are much frequented in the springtime by pleasure parties, on account of the beauty of their gardens. The chromolithograph opposite represents one of these parties, some of whom appear to have been indulging too freely in sake. The fellow dancing and waving the fan about is apparently addressing a love song to the lady opposite, whose husband is evidently desirous of putting a stop to the flirtation. A Tea House Merrymaking. A Tea House Merrymaking. Chapter 11. The Spy System, the Bath House. There are two Japanese customs so diametrically opposed to English ideas, and so materially affecting the national character, that it is necessary to call special attention to them. The espionage system is perhaps the strangest, as everyone in the country is subjected to it, from the Mikado and Tycoon, or spiritual and temporal emperors, to the humblest of the people. All offices of importance are double, that is to say, every governor of a town or district is associated with a vice-governor, who is a nometsky or spy upon him, and is in turn spied upon by others. In this way a constant check is kept upon the executive of the empire. In addition to this acknowledged system, government officials are frequently watched by secret spies, who, for aught they know, may be some apparently trusty friend, so that, even in the absence of their double, they can never be certain that they are free from supervision. In private life families spy on each other, for which purpose they are divided into coteries of 5 households, the heads of which are not only responsible for themselves, their families and servants, but also for the other members of the coterie, and any wrongdoing in one household must be immediately reported to the proper authorities, to secure the rest from sharing in the punishment of the offense. To such an extent is this system of responsibility carried, that a whole district sometimes suffers for the offense of one of its residents. In the towns where the streets are intersected with barriers a few hundred yards apart, which are always closed at night, the people living within these enclosures are often under the ban of the officials for some irregularity which has occurred within the limits. This constant espionage has, of course, a very pernicious effect upon the character of the people, as it necessarily instills feelings of distrust and suspicion among near neighbors. Yet it is marvelous how well their social system works, and still more marvelous that the officials, who in public life practice every kind of deception and artifice, should be, and from all accounts deservedly so, distinguished in private life for their truthfulness, candor, and hospitality. The other notable peculiarity is the indiscriminate manner in which the sexes mingle in the public bath houses. All Japanese perform their ablutions once or twice a day, for which purpose the poorer classes resort to the bath houses, which are generally open to the road or street. Some bath houses have the women's lavatory separate, and one of these is the subject of the illustration. This arrangement, however, is more for convenience than in compliance with the demands of modesty, as is evidenced by the fact that a male attendant is supplying water, and that his presence is plainly a matter of perfect indifference to the women bathing, with their children, in his immediate vicinity. Uyea, or bath house uyea, or bath house, but it is in the common bathroom where this extraordinary feature of Japanese life unmistakably presents itself. Their men, women and children perform their ablutions together, with all the apparent innocency of our first parents. The proceedings are conducted with perfect order and good nature. The steaming occupants make way for one another with ballroom politeness. They laugh and chat over their tubs, discuss the public notices on the walls, or, maybe, saunter occasionally to the open door or window, to look at something which has attracted their attention, or to exchange greetings with a passing friend. All this is done with a freedom that speaks for itself of their utter unconsciousness of any impropriety in their conduct. Frequently a lady is assisted by her husband in the cleansing process, and this is not necessarily a matrimonial compliment, as regular bathing men are employed for the convenience of those who require such attention. The favorite times for bathing are the middle of the day and the evening, but in the summer the bath houses are always full. Going home from the bath house. Native drawing. Going home from the bath house. Native drawing. The modus operandi is very simple. The bather, after duly depositing his straw shoes at the door and paying a few cash for admittance, at once proceeds to disrobe himself, placing his garments in an allotted compartment. He then secures a tub, which is filled with lukewarm water, and, squatting down before it, lathers himself with a vegetable, soapy material, which is sewn up in a small bag. At this stage of the proceeding he will probably enter into conversation with his neighbors, complacently rejoicing in his soapiness until the remonstrances of the bathing house man, or of some would-be possessor of his tub, compel him to finish his ablutions. It would seem natural to conclude that such a system must have immoral effects, but the Japanese attribute no evil consequences to it. They say that, being accustomed to it from childhood, it only enables them to carry out those habits of cleanliness which distinguish alike their persons and their homes. It is amusing to notice the care taken by the Japanese to protect themselves from a second bath on returning from the bath houses to their homes in rainy weather. The artisan with the umbrella, which bears his name and direction, by the way, is an instance of this. Chapter 12. Love of flowers. One of the many traits of the refinement which characterizes all classes of Japanese is their passion for flowers, which the singularly rich and varied nature of the flora of the country, aided by the magnificent climate, enables them to cultivate with great success. Every Japanese has some knowledge of the art of gardening, and, however humble a house may be, It generally has a potted flower or dwarf tree about it, or, in the absence of that, a flowering branch of peach or cherry, placed in water. Regular professors teach the art of dwarfing, training, and grafting trees and plants, and of laying out miniature landscapes, into which artificial mountains and valleys are introduced, and very frequently lakes, studded with Lilliputian fern-covered islands, around which gold and silver fish may be seen darting about, or, if the sun is hot, taking refuge under curious Japanese bridges, or the broad leaves of the lotus, which usually cover a portion of the surface, the only thing out of proportion, probably, in the details of the miniature landscape. The sitting apartments in Japanese houses are generally situated at the sides or back, and either open upon flower beds, grounds of the above description, or some kind of enclosure, shaded by peach or pear trees, trained trellis fashion overhead, or by cedars, with one solitary bough twisting fantastically over the ground, showing, in its unnatural contortions, the skill of the artist, the other branches having been lopped off, or stunted, to facilitate the growth and training of this one. Gardens for the sale of dwarf trees and flowers are also very common. Some are perfect bijoux. As a rule, the varied collections of flowers, planted in colored china pots, are arranged, with very agreeable effect, in tiers of shelves round the sides, and on stands about the gardens. Many of the dwarf trees, especially the maples, have great variety of foliage, the result of constant grafting. To such an extent is this practiced, that it is rare to find pure botanical specimens in a Japanese garden. Plants are sometimes cultivated for their berries as well as for their variegated foliage. One very beautiful specimen, producing at the same time bright scarlet and yellow berries, is believed by many to have been obtained from cuttings of an exquisite shrub, which is said to be the principal ornament of the regions of the Kamis or Japanese heaven. Even the fern family undergoes a strange metamorphosis at the hands of Japanese gardeners. Some of the fronds are artificially variegated, and others, on reaching maturity, have a curious crumpled appearance. Again, the roots of certain small species are frequently twisted into curious devices, and hung up in grottos, or shady corners. The effect of these, when the roots are partly concealed by the fresh young fronds, is very pretty. Nearly every fortnight a fresh flower comes into season, and is in great demand for the time, heavy prices being readily paid for fine specimens. The poorer classes commonly buy flowers from men who gain their livelihood by hawking them about the streets. They buy them not only to gratify their tastes, but as offerings to their Lars and Penates, patron Kamis, or to decorate the tombs of departed relatives, a religious ceremony which is strictly observed. Flower shows are often held in the large towns, and are much frequented by the people. A flower show. The illustration represents a chrysanthemum show. These flowers are much esteemed by the Japanese, who pay more attention to size and brilliancy of color than to perfume. The stone in the center is called a skakushi. On it, poetry in praise of flowers is inscribed. This is a custom of very ancient origin, and poetical inscriptions on stones and rocks are to be often seen in public places. The piece of ornamental stonework is an ishidoro or stone lamp, which is very common in gardens, and is much prized on account of the historical associations connected with it. Girl with flowers. Girl with flowers. The Japanese have many floral compliments. A very pretty one is intimated by a present of seeds, especially if presented to a foreigner returning to his own country, the purport being, plant these seeds about your home, and, when you see them growing, think of me. As an instance of the influence which flowers have upon the Japanese character, the word hana or flower is commonly used as a term of endearment. It is usually applied by parents to a favorite daughter, or by a lover to his mistress. It is also used to distinguish the bride and the bridegroom, as hanayomi hanamoko. Floral love tokens, although they only consist of a single sprig, are as much prized among the Japanese as among ourselves, and are, no doubt, sometimes treasured in their fading, as the Japanese are not only poetical, but much given to sentimental reflections. Footnote 1. Return. The slice of salt fish which accompanies Japanese letters is an exhortation to the same effect. Footnote 2. Return. As an illustration of the spirit which characterizes British merchants in their intercourse with the Japanese, it may be mentioned that a liberal subscription was promptly got up for the re-establishment of these burnt-out villages, but, although the Japanese government seemed thoroughly to appreciate the kindly spirit in which it was offered, national pride came in the way of its acceptance, and the people were only induced to waive their objection on its being urgently pressed upon them that the fire which destroyed the Foreigners' Club was the cause of the calamity. Footnote 3. Return. A very interesting volume of translations of Japanese lyrical odes has lately been published by F. V. Dickens, Esquire, M.B. Smith, Elder, and Company. Footnote 4. Return. Sir Rutherford Alcock. See Capital of the Tycoon. Footnote 5. Return. In 1853 an English man-of-war visited this island, and 2 of the officers were hoisted up in the basket for the purpose of taking sights. One of them, who was my informant, describes it as a walled-in barren island, with no other mode of ingress or egress than that described. Footnote 6. Return. The whole of the operations, with the exception of the storming of the stockade, which took place late in the day after the French and Dutch had embarked, were under the personal superintendence of the English and French admirals. Book cover. Asterisk 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 end of the Project Gutenberg ebook sketches of Japanese manners and customs asterisk 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 updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4 Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5 Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6 You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7 Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8 You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1 Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116. 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.